Alright, so what's good everyone? It's Einhounder here again. Wanted to bring you another video, not about the release date. As you've probably already seen, you know what the release date it is. It's June. What I wanted to come out today was what everyone really wants, which is trying to figure out who this guy is. So what we're going to do in this video is break down what class he might be and kind of get into the details of what we might be able to expect later on in future updates with NGS. So once again, thanks for stopping by, and let's get into it. Now the question is, what's the weapon that Garo's holding? You know, by the looks of it, looks like a sword, but he is holding it with one hand, so it could also be a wand. We'll get into little reasons of why it could be one of those, but the more I think about it, I think it could actually be a new weapon. And we'll get into some of the theories that I have of why that might be. But first, let's take care of the first two, sword and wand. Let's slow it down a little bit. So we see him running. Most likely this is going to be a photon dash. Then he's about to strike. You see that photon dash slice. Now of course, this could be a photon dash for one of the weapons we already have. It could be a PA if we think about another potential class and what this weapon actually might be. But let's get into the similarities of where we've seen that animation before. So what you see here is a sword hunter and his photon dash. First he takes a sprint, and then you see the spinning choral slash. Very familiar to what we saw with Garo doing with his potentially unknown weapon, but it could be sword. Another thing to call out is that seems to be the only sword animation in which the player uses one hand, which might be interesting to see what type of weapon that is, because in the cutscene, Garo is only using one hand to hold the weapon, but it could still be sword, but could also be hinting at something else. And on one final note, it's also important to pay attention to how the player holds a sword. You know, the blade is usually longer, the hands are closer to the hilt. I want to pay close attention to that as we see where Garo holds it in the cutscene and the familiarities it has with another weapon. That weapon being wand. Notice where the player's holding the wand. Definitely lower on the grip, closer to the pommel. And it's interesting because that's exactly where Garo's holding the weapon after he finishes what seems to be a photon dash. Now what you'll see in the next clip is just a wand normal attack. Unfortunately, in the prologue stream 1, they actually didn't show the step attack, they didn't show the photon dash attack. They did show wand parry counter through a step dodge counter, but the animation's a little different. But what we do know is that when it comes to the photon dash attack / step attack, it shares similar animations with sword. In addition, we can be fairly certain that the first basic attack in the normal attack wand string is very similar to that of the step or photon dash attack. Now let's get into some similarities that we see with both of these weapons back in PSO2, which gives us a little bit more insights into what it could be given how this weapon looks in the cutscene. Now of course these are just a few examples. You know, when we look at the cutscene weapon, it looks like an axe. And so what I did is went through some of the sword weapons, went through some of the wand weapons that share that axe quality, but also looking at the nuances between the two and comparing them to what Garo is holding in the cutscene. The first example was the sword known as the Blizzaxe. Now, technically there's 4 versions of these, 2 yellow, one of them being NT, blue and red. But what I want to call attention to is looking at the length of the blade and seeing how that blade goes from the top all the way down towards the hilt, kind of mimicking that sword to where when you swing it, you need to hit with the entire sword, versus an axe where you're really hitting with a certain point for that most impact. Next, we had the wand, and I actually used two examples because there's actually a lot of axe similarities for a lot of the wands in PSO2. But for this example on the left, we have austere and what is known in the JP version, as it might have changed in global, as detonation gore. What I want to call out is you notice that the blade is very focused at the top. And of course, stylistically and functionally has a different purpose. You know, wands are more like maces or even hatchets, which you could say are smaller axes, where you're really trying to hit that small point for the most impact, versus the sword, where essentially you're using the entire length for reach and power. And that's pretty much what I want to discuss, looking at sword and wand and seeing if Garoa is just another hunter or if they actually made a main character techer. For me, I'm a little biased. You know, I've been a techer main since 2012, OG PSO2, so I gotta go with techer if they're calling Garoa one of the strongest arcs on the planet. But who knows? With that said, I am leaning towards this being a completely new weapon and potentially new class. What that class is, who knows? What that weapon is, as I've been discussing, the axe. Now, why do I think it's a new weapon? Well, that's actually a conspiracy theory I had when I started looking a little closer at the trailer they had in today's stream. Now, it went a bit unnoticed, but the tell is actually in the main character profiles. One of the things you need to look for is that everyone, except for Garoa, has a weapon shown. When we look at Ina, one of the main characters, we see her rifle, so likely she's a ranger. Manon, our second or co-main character, we see her with looks to be twin daggers, and so likely she's fighter. And then we had the cast Dozer, or in the JP version it'll probably be called Bruden or something like that. But what we see there, he's holding partisan, and so likely, like Ash, another hunter. But then all of a sudden, no weapon for Garoa. And so looking at that seemed very peculiar. Every character has a weapon, every character has a class that looks to be available on release, and then we've got Garoa, who's got a weapon that looks like an axe, looks like it might be something new, and it doesn't pop up in his character profile during the trailer. For all those who remember way back when in 2012, one of the things PSO2 was known for was showing weapons before they were released. Usually in the form of the story mode, because one of the antagonists had that weapon and later on that weapon appears. Definitely that happened for Knuckles because at the time Fighter wasn't released. So we know that SEGA does have a habit of giving characters things that don't yet exist, but foreshadowing things that are to come. In addition, for all of those Phantasy Star Universe players, Axe is one of the few weapons that's missing in PSO2. And when we think of Garoa being called one of the strongest, you know, we have to ask ourselves, is it strength as in just raw power? Or is it other things just as in, you know, combat abilities? But if it is strength and he is that brute force arc, then it stands to reason that an axe would definitely fit that persona. Now, of course, he could just be another hunter. It's not like it's the first time SEGA doesn't layer on hunters. But it does seem kind of odd to have a story mode trailer and 3 of the characters being featured are all hunters, 2 of them carrying swords. It also might be that he just has a rare weapon of a sword and he is a hunter, but one of the things we have noticed in all the information provided to us by SEGA is that they've been pretty consistent showing basic looking weapons for each class. And so I look at this as, this isn't a rare weapon, this is actually a weapon type, this is that basic weapon form. Of course, we won't know anything until the game releases, but my first inclinations is that SEGA actually might be providing a new weapon. You know, there's at least a new weapon in each series. You could look at jet boots and tax technically as the weapons for PSO2. So it stands to reason they bring a weapon back that I know a lot of you are probably looking forward to. So as of now, if I had to take a guess, I am going to put a lot of weight into this being a potentially new class and a new weapon. And then of course, it's Techer, because Techers are the strongest, doesn't matter what anyone says. And then Hunter. But hey, that's just my take. Love to know what you guys think in the comments, and of course, we'll know everything in June, whichever day June is for when this game releases. Other than that, once again, thank you guys for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.